This is our lesson on section, and before we get into it, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you always have our videos. Section. Our objective is that at the end of this lesson, the students would be able to describe the types of section. And for section, if you are a student who have some knowledge about dissection, that would be an advantage to you as far as this topic is concerned. Yes, but if you don't, no problem. We are going to look at it. Now, what is section? Section can be defined as a cut through a specimen. And why is section so important? For purposes of study, a tissue, organ, or the organism is cut along a suitable plane such that most of its body parts would be observable. That is the point. Just like in the case of body orientation, we learned that position the organism such that most of its body parts would be in view. Same here. You are going to cut the organism or the body parts of the organism, but it should be done such that most of its body parts can be seen and clearly examined. Right. And we are saying that it's especially important in microscopic observation, but although not only that, but especially when it is microscopic observation, it means the section that is going to be done should be done rightly. There are three main types of section that we are going to look at. So we will look at the longitudinal section, transverse section, and vertical section. So let's start by looking at longitudinal section. And yes, we already know that section has got to do with a cut through the specimen. Right. So what is longitudinal section? That is a section along the length of the tissue, organ, or the organism that you are studying. Along the length. So it makes this very important that in section, you should be able to identify the length. And you identify the length in the context of the longer side. So considering one end to the other end, which is longer, that is going to be your length. Let's look at this illustration of orange. Now I can position orange this way, and considering end to end, this would be the longer side. So this would be the length. Now if the cut is done along the length, that is longitudinal. And that is going to give us something like this. Later we are going to distinguish this longitudinal from transverse, and you're going to use the seam orange. So now observe the internal parts that have been shown here in the image. This is what I'm talking about. Observe this closely when you cut it longitudinally. Now let's go to transverse section. In transverse section too, we are going to consider the length. But here the cut is done across the length. In longitudinal, the cut was done along the length, but in transverse, the cut is done across the length. So that is in other words to say that a cross section or a perpendicular cut. So cutting it 90 degrees to the line that you draw for the length, or where you identify as the length, doing a perpendicular cut. So what do we mean? Let's look at this. This is the orange that we saw under the longitudinal section. This time, the cut is going to be done this way, across the length, not along the length. And when it's cut across the length, this is what we are going to observe. So you see that the two different images, according to the kind of section that we did, are showing us different internal arrangement of the orange. That is why we are saying that section is very important. How you cut would determine which parts would be shown. Okay, now let us go to vertical section. What do we mean by vertical section? This is an upright section through the tissue, organ, or the organism, especially one that does not have a clearly defined length or breadth. For example, if you want to observe the skin, the mammalian skin, which side are you going to identify as the length? Which side are you going to identify as the breadth? Right. So in this case, the cut is going to be done upright into the body of the organism, or into the particular tissue or organ we are dealing with. And a defined plane would be used for vertical section, right? So remember that this one is an upright section. So as compared to the transverse section, where we base on the length to identify how to do the cross section, here we don't consider length, but just use a plane that will be defined, and then you cut upright through that particular plane, and you further proceed to make your observations. Okay, so this is what we have for section. In this lesson, we have looked at the types of section, and we have talked about longitudinal section, we have talked about transverse section, and we have talked about vertical section. But at your level, the longitudinal section and the transverse section are mostly used for the organisms that we study in the lab. Okay, let's not forget to answer these questions, and you can send your answers in the comment section. Describe each of the following. First one is longitudinal section, and the second one is transverse section. Right, so very good. And so far we are building our skills bit by bit, and we are learning how to identify certain things, how to cut, how to orient bodies, and all these are going to help as far as your studies in biology is concerned. Okay, next we are going to look at the biological drawings. Yes, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, as we will be discussing more topics here. Remember, this is the right place for you to learn biology.